Okay, in this video, we are going to see how you can create calculated measures and even new columns from existing columns in Power BI. So first task for you would be to download the resource, Contoso Sales Sample. Be sure to add your name first and last to the beginning of it when you download it. Open it up in Power BI. It's a Power BI file, so you can open it right up in Power BI Desktop. And then we're going to go over here to the Fields pane and expand the sales table to see what all we have in it. Okay, so we can take a look at sales amount. And when we check that, that goes into the workspace. And we have our new visualization, sum of all values in the sales amount column. So any field, as we know, with that sigma in front of it is basically a measure. And we can aggregate them. If we want to change the aggregation in the chart, right now it's just the sum of everything. We can go to the visualizations pane here, and we're going to click down on value. So we've got our sales amount in here. We could go to value, and where's the sales amount is listed here, we could change that value from the sum to, let's say, average. So now we're going to calculate the average of each sale, basically the mean value, and we can see it's there around $3,700. Now let's say I wanted to bring in the region country name from geography into this field as well, or into this visualization as well. And of course, we'll see the visualization change to average sales by region country. So this is a good way when you have a mix of categorical and numeric values to evaluate your data. All right, now we can also create our own measures in Power BI, and I'm going to change my view here and make my panes here a little wider so I have a little bit more space. So for each measure I've got here, I can actually select more options. I've got, I could create a brand new measure. I've got some quick measures that allow me to perform top 10, those types of quick activities. I can use the Home tab here, and in the calculations area, tell Power BI I want to create a new measure as well. I can also use this selection over here in the fields. Let's say right now I've got sales amount, I've got discount, I've got returns. What if I want to create a new measure that just says net sales? So I could go ahead and create that. So I'm going to go over here into the sales table and create new measure. Now when I create a new measure, Power BI gives me a formula workspace where I can tell it what I want in that new measure. So I've created my new measure. It's just called measure here. I could have created it in any one of these tables, but it makes most sense to create it here where I'm going to use it. So when I click on measure, I can see it shows up here, and that name right at the beginning is the name that Power BI has by default given us. Well, we don't want this to be measure. We will call it net sales. All right. So now I've got net sales equals, and at this point I can start typing in a formula by selecting a field, adding it, subtracting the next field, etc., just like I would type in a formula into Excel. I could also use functions, very similar to the functions you have in Excel. Power BI uses a programming language called DAX, D-A-X, and one of the main functions there, just like in any programming language, is sum. So when I start typing in, you can see a bunch of different functions pop up. I can actually use my function selector here. And just like I would in Excel, once I select the one I want, I can hit Tab and Power BI will set up the function and start it off for me. Now it's just a matter of selecting the columns that I want. The first column I want is the sales amount. So I start off with the table I want, sales, and you can see as I get there, Power BI helps me out. So I'll click on sales amount and click Tab. And that fills in the sales amount for me. Next thing I can do now that I have added up all of my sales is I will subtract the sum of all of my discount amounts. And the sum of all my return amounts. So what I've done, I've got net sales equals the sum of all sales minus the sum of all sales discount amounts minus the sum of sales return amounts. And then I can press enter. And I've got my new measure ready to use in a visualization. If I want to format my function or my formula, if I want to format my formula and make it a little bit easier to read, I can actually go to the place I want and press Alt, Enter, and then a tab to put some spacing in there. And now I can see a little bit more easily what my formula actually looks like. Okay, so just from a documentation standpoint, this is something to consider when you're building something that other people might use. It's useful to help them figure out what it is you've been doing. So at this point, I've created this first visualization. I'll click outside that visualization, and I can create a brand new visualization. So I'll select net sales and just drag it over here somewhere outside that visualization. And if I wanted to see how my total sales before netting compares to my net sales, I can bring in sales amount into my visualization and get a comparison. And then I'll bring in region country name again and see how that looks. Now if I select a new blank area in my workspace, I can add a slicer. So I'm going to go into my visualizations pane, and then I'll bring in the table visualization into my workspace. I want a new table visualization. I'll resize that. And then I'm going to drag the year from my calendar into that table. Now what Power BI has done is it's added up all the years. That's not what we want. So we're going to go over to our year value in our visualizations pane and tell it that we don't want to summarize. So we don't want any aggregation in the years. We just want all of the different years. And now I can go to my visualizations pane and turn this into a slicer. So the slicer icon is this one here. So we showed it as a table to begin with, just to make sure we were getting what we wanted. Now we convert it to a slicer. As long as I have that table still selected, it's going to build my slicer for me. And I now have a slicer, and I can of course resize the slicer and choose which years I want to display in my visualizations on this page. Now I can actually use a measure I have created in another new measure that I want to create. What if I wanted to know average net sales? Well, I could create a net sale by sales quantity. So we'll do that right now. So we'll create a new measure. And you can see it shows up here in my formula bar. I'm going to change the measure name to net sales per unit. And I want this to be net sales. So I've got that pops up. So I hit tab, net sales divided by sum sales quantity. Finish my function and press enter. The name of my measure now changes to net sales per unit, and I've got it ready to go. And I can bring that into a new area on my page. I'm going to move my slider over here. And drag this up here so we can see it a little bit better. And you can see I'm getting some guides to line things up. And like we've seen before, we'll get our net sales per unit aggregated. So let's see if we can change things up again. So I'm going to select my visualization here and change it to a tree map. So right next to the donut chart here, you'll see a tree map. So I convert that to a tree map. And initially it's just one big shaded box. And of course that will change once I start bringing in some different categories. So let's start with product category. And I'll say product category, bring it in here. And now we get a grouping in our tree map by product category. What if we take away product category, and I can do that just by unchecking it, and go to subcategory and bring in product subcategory. All right, so our tree map changes quite a bit. If I were to bring in all the data again, and you see that the tree map can get fairly involved if you have a lot of different classifications. What if I changed it and put in product name? I'll take away product subcategory, drag in product name, and you can see at this point it gets almost ridiculous. All right, so tree maps can be useful when you're trying to compare different classes, but you want to be aware of building a tree map that is way too involved. But for now, let's just go ahead and leave your tree map like this, and we'll move on to do a little bit more. Let's say I wanted to create a new column now. I'm going to go to a new page in my file here. We've seen how we have product category and product subcategory. What if I wanted to create a new column that combined the two? we'll put our new category in the product subcategory field. So we'll go ahead here, and instead of new measure, we'll say new column. And just like before, we get our formula bar, only this time it says column instead of measure. We'll go ahead and change that. We'll call this product full category. Now, because we're going to be pulling in information from multiple tables for this new column, we have to let Power BI know that these are related. So I'm going to use the related function. And you can see here, related pops in. I'll go ahead and hit tab, and it starts me off. First thing I'll do is I'll bring in product category. Product category. At this point, we close our parentheses, and now we'll put an ampersand in. So this ampersand basically says I want to concatenate different items together. So my product category is a field that's going to have some kind of a text name I want to concatenate, and the next thing I'm going to concatenate is just a little divider. In this case, it's going to be a dash. So I put in a quotation mark, and then my dash, and then I close my quotation mark. So when I use quotation marks like this, that basically says whatever text is in here, you're going to literally put into that new column name. So I now have, I'm going to use product category and then a dash. And as you might expect, the next thing we'll put in is our product subcategory. All right, so we'll put another ampersand in to let the formula know we want to concatenate something else. All right, so we now have product full category equals related product category from the product category table, ampersand, our dash separator, ampersand, product subcategory from the product subcategory table. So we used related for the product category because that is the field that is coming from a related table. All right, we didn't need to use related for product subcategory because that's already in the table we're working in right now. All right, so I've done that concatenation. I press enter, and I now have my new column that I can work with. The first thing I might want to do with my brand new column name is just to see how that concatenation worked. So I'm just going to check the checkbox here, and that should give me a report that lists out my brand new column names. So you can see audio dash audio accessories. All right, so it looks like it worked pretty well. I'm happy with this. I can now use it in other visualizations. Since I'm in a table view already, let's go ahead and bring in that sales amount. I'll click the checkbox there, and sales amount just got added to my report. And you can see I've got myself a nice table with a total sales amount. Okay, let's go to a new page now. I can also use logical functions in creating new column names. So let's say I've got a store name in my stores table, and I also have a status that tells me whether the store is actually open now or not. Is it an active store, or is it one that's closed before? Is it one that we closed previously? Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go to my stores and click create a new column. And just like before, we'll put our column information in. We'll call our new column active store name. And after the equal sign, we'll begin if. So we all know how if works in Excel. It works basically the same here or in any programming languages. Some require you to do an if then else, but in this case, you can see I'm going to have some kind of a test. And then if that test turns out to be true, I do something. And then optionally, if that test is not true, I can do something different. In this case, I'm only concerned about those that are active. So I'll start typing in my status, if status, and I can see stores status. So if stores status equals on, and I'm going to type this in quotation marks, so capital O, lowercase n. So that's one of the values of status, and you can check that out by looking at your data view or by creating a little table of status just to verify for yourself. But if stores status equals on, that's my test. So I can then in that, and you can see that the function helper moves to the next argument. Well, what do I do if that store status is on? Well, we want to use the store name. So I'll go ahead and open a square bracket and start typing in store. And you can see store name is an option there. And then I could put a comma in. Then I could put a comma in. And for false, we'll just say, okay, this is an inactive store. We don't care what the name of it is. So let's go ahead and type in quotation marks, inactive. So that means that the value that we provide will be the actual value inactive. So I press enter now. I now have my new active store name column. I'll go ahead and check that, and that will add a column. That will add a table to my workspace that lists all of our stores. And like I did before, I will bring in sales amount into that same table and have myself a nice table that I can now scroll through. And you can see, since it's sorted in alphabetical order, inactive drops to the bottom. Quite a few sales associated with inactive stores, but that's good to know over the time frame we've been looking at, or over the full time frame we have available. All right, so that's basically it for calculated fields and columns. So let's go ahead and change these page names. So let's go to page 1 and change that to calculated measure. Let's go to page 2 and change the name of that page to calculated column. And then let's go to page 3 and change the name of that to calculated column if. All right, so we now have 3 new pages that we've created, calculating a new measure, calculating a column, and calculating a column using an if function. All right, hope you found this useful. We'll be back with more videos as we move on in the workbook.